Hi everybody, this is Shawna Odette from the Flying Cat Academy. Welcome to lesson number 27. In this lesson, we will talk about how to add the suffix es. Let's begin by setting up our table. You'll need the top 160 sight word list, the sight word study method instruction sheet, the student's card pack, some blank cards so that you can introduce new sight words, markers, a highlighter, and some pencils. Moving on to the short vowel drill, you'll have the teacher instruction sheet, the keyword pictures, and the keyword sentence. Then we'll have the phonemic awareness drill instruction sheet and the colored tiles for the student. We'll have the visual drill and the auditory drill instruction sheets and the card pack on which the student is currently working. Make sure they're giving the two sounds of S since we've already taught that. The syllable card drill for today looks a little different. We're going to have multiple prefixes, but only one base because we've introduced that concept of base now and prefix. And this is a great way to get students to understand that a word has a meaning, but the parts of the word have meaning as well. So for eject, it means to throw. And if we think about, if we put this with the prefix ob, well, ob means against. And so you say, well, student, so what does this word object mean? Throw against is literally what it means. So when I object to you, I'm throwing my argument against yours. And then we'll move eject down to the next one, and we'll have the student tap and say the prefix, and then they'll already have the syllable eject they'll have already. So we'll say eject means to throw, and sub means under. So throw under. So you could say, when I subject my will upon you, I am forcing you to do what I want. So I'm throwing you under the bus, maybe. How about eject plus in? In means obviously within. So when you get an injection, you're throwing something into your body. Then re, meaning back or again. So if I reject something, I'm throwing your argument back at you. And pro meaning come forth, right? So if I throw something forth, I'm projecting it. I'm like a projectile, something that you throw. And then the last one, D. So we go back to what's the meaning of throw, eject. And then off is D. So throw off. So when you're dejected, you're thrown off. You're not your usual self. And it's the power of the prefix and suffix, like looking at the meaning of the different parts, because we get so much more meaning by doing that. And so we'll start to use that whenever we can in our drills, the idea of looking for meaning in the parts. The final thing that you'll need as far as the drills is you'll need a drill for the sounds of S. We have the usual ones of S and Z that have been covered. And in the new content part of the lesson today, we'll look at when do we use ES? And the answer is when we add a second syllable. So we don't say fox, we say foxes. And we need that E because what's a syllable? It's a word, a part of a word with one vowel pattern. So hen, we'd say, okay, let's move it down to the S first. And to hens. So which one would that go under? Let's sort it. Oh, I think the S is sounding like a Z because N is motor on, so that's where that one goes. How about wed? Well, D is a motor on, so we know it'll sound like a Z, weds. So that'll go under the same one. And then we can just, just go through and there's one, we'll look at fuss here. We would say fusses, and you can hear there's two syllables, fusses, so that must be an is situation. And then we'll have the magnetic letter tile drills for reading and spelling all set up with the magnetic letter tile sheet spread out in a rainbow shape with all those letters. Then we'll have the syllable pounding, which instruction sheet, the new phoneme grapheme kinesthetic discovery sheet, which we probably won't use today, and the sheets for the lesson, including the isolated word sheet, the story, and the connected writing for the sentences. Let's begin with the sight word study method. Student, you can take out your card pack for this one, and I'd like you to read each word on all your cards. When you get one correct, you can put a check mark in the corner of the card. If you have trouble with a word, then your teacher will help you with the blocking strategies. When you're finished, give the card pack to your teacher, and then it's your teacher's turn to read. The teacher reads the card and the student writes down each word. When a word is written correctly, in the other corner of the index card, you'll put a check, using blocking strategies if you run into trouble, of course. And then you can have a quick discussion about which of those words have been mastered. If you decide that a word is mastered, then it comes out of the card pack and you're done with it for now. And then, teacher, if there's time, you can introduce a new sight word if there's space in the card pack to do so. Let's do the short vowel drill. Student, for this one, you'll have to take out your keyword pictures and your keyword sentence. Trace a shape with 2 fingers, saying apple, and then underline it and say the sound ah. And then move on to the other ones. Eddie, itchy, all living up. Do each one as many times as your teacher deems necessary. And then you move on to your keyword picture. Sentence, stretching out the vowel sounds as you say the sentence. Let's do the phonemic awareness drill. Student, you'll need to take out your colored tiles for this one. I'm going to tell you that your word is Sam. Can you repeat that word? Sam is a boy's name, so if I was going to put that in a sentence, I might say Sam and Sebastian are friends. All right, can you build the word Sam with your colored tiles? Once you do that, tap it and say it. Okay, you've got Sam down there. Now I'd like you to take out a new color and call it T. Okay, I'd like you to put the T right after the S in Sam. Now tap it and say it. What's your new word? It won't be a word on its own. Did you get stam? If you did, that's correct. Let's turn it into a real word. Add a P on the end of stam. Now tap it and say it. Did you get stamp? If you did, that's right. Find the ah in stamp. Are you touching it? Now change the ah into an What's your new word? Tap it and say it. Did you get stump? If you did, that's correct. Now take a tile and call it S. We already have stump down there, so I wonder what color the S has to be that you're adding at the end of stump. Look at what color you had at the beginning of stump, and you'll need to use the same color because we're adding the same sound. S. Okay, what's your new word? Tap it and say it. Did you get stumps? There are many tree stumps. If you did, that's right. Great job. You can put your tiles away. Let's do the visual drill. You'll need your card pack for this one. And the teacher flashes the card and the student says the sounds or sound that it makes. Did you say S and Z? If you did, that's correct. Teacher, do this for 6 to 8 cards and then come back to me. Okay, for the auditory drill, the teacher says the sound. P. Student, can you repeat that sound? Now I'd like you to write down the symbol that goes with P. When you finish, underline it and say the sound again. And then we check your work. How'd you do? Teacher, remember that you're taking out the sounds that have been mastered for the visual and auditory drill once they're I use the same card pack for both, so once the sound is and the symbol are both mastered, I remove it from the pack. Do the auditory drill for 6 to 8 cards and then come back to me. It's time for the syllable card drill. Teacher, there are specific instructions about how to do this drill, and they're in the previous part of the video in the setting up the table section. And for student, you'll notice there's lots of prefixes on the table today. There's only one base. It's really interesting when we think about the meanings of the syllables. So the prefixes all have special meanings, and so do the bases. And when we consider the meanings that the different parts of the word have, then we get a greater understanding of the word than we ever could have just by thinking of what the word means on its own. We've been talking about the different sounds that the letter S can make. Do you remember the 2 sounds of S? Tell your teacher now. Did you say that it can sound like S as its motor off sound and Z as its motor on sound? And how do we know when we add S to a word, in this case we're going to make this base is going to become more than one, how do we know if it's going to sound like S or Z? Can you tell your teacher now? So tap out the base and then underline it and say the word, and then add the S on it and change that, the meaning of that word. So this word is dogs, and you can hear that it's a motor on sound of the S, the Z sound. G is a motor on sound, and so we're just going to keep the motor on, and we'll say the Z sound because of that. If I had a motor off sound right before the S, what would be my new word? And in this case, how would the S sound? Would it be S or Z? It would be S because the T is a motor off sound, so we'll just keep the motor off and the S says S. Today we're going to learn about one other situation where we make things plural, more than one. There's a different way. Sometimes we can't use S. And that happens in a word like fox. How do you say that there's more than one? We don't say fox, we say fox is, don't we? So what happened there is we added a second syllable to the word. Put your hand under your chin and let's do it. Foxes. Do you see how it hit my chin twice? Foxes. So there's two syllables. And we know that in a syllable is, remember our definition? It's a word or part of a word with one vowel pattern. And so if I'm adding a syllable to fox when I make it plural, when I say there's more than one, then I have to have a vowel or else I haven't made a syllable. So that's the purpose of the E. We can't just add an S on to make fox plural because we're adding a second syllable, so there has to be a vowel in there. Now, one thing to really watch out for is it sounds like is. And so if we were thinking, what do those sounds really sound like? Is. It sounds like IZ, doesn't it? But we're always going to write the suffix as it should be written, which is ES is the suffix. This happens in boxes, fusses, kisses, so many words. There is a pattern, like a way to know what type of words are going to add the second syllable. And you've got a little sort that you're going to do to figure this out. So we'll have sounds like S, and these are all the motor off sounds. I just think it's much quicker and easier to remember that when the consonant right before the S is a motor off, we're just going to keep the motor off and it'll sound like S. And for the motor on sounds, so dog, the G is a motor on, so the S will keep its motor on, and it'll sound like Z. So these are all just listed motor on sounds. And then for is, there are certain letters in the alphabet that force us to have a second syllable. And I personally think it's much easier, instead of remembering each of these different ones, the J, S, Z, C, H, S, H, it's much easier just to realize that a second syllable is being added. Washes, crunches, lunches. Because then you don't have to remember all the individual letters. So right now, I'd like you to work on the sort that your teacher has all cut out and ready on the table for you. And you're going to first figure out what does the word become when it has the S added to it. So for example, this one you would tap it and say it. And then you'd say, is that an S situation or an ES? So let's say it. Branches. Oh, well, that became two syllables. So we know that must be an ES. And then you'd sort it into the correct pile, which is the ES pile. Do that now and then come back to me. Let's do the magnetic letter tile drill for reading. Student, do you have your tiles out? Your sound is er. Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Your second sound is I. Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. The next sound is Can you repeat that sound? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. The last sound is Z. Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Now tap it and say it, and think about that last sound in the word. what letter needs to be used in that last sound? Did you say rims and realize that that was a S suffix on the end of rims? Even though it sounds like Z, you're going to write it as an S because it's multiple rims. Like maybe we could say the car has 4 rims. Okay, put those tiles away and let's try a new word. Your sound is G. Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Your next sound is Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. The next sound is Ah. Can you repeat that sound? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. The next sound is B. Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And the last sound is Z. Can you repeat that sound? Now find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Tap it and say it, and then make sure you check that ending. Is there a suffix that has been added, and what is the correct grapheme for that suffix? Did you say grabs? If you did, that's correct. And did you get the S on the end, the S suffix? I hope you did. You can put your tiles away unless your teacher would like to do another word. And when we're moving on, you are going to read your isolated word list, and then you'll read the story. Let's do the magnetic letter tile drill for writing. Student, do you have your tiles out? Your word is foxes. Can you repeat that word? How many syllables are there in foxes? Let's put your hand under your chin and let's find out. Foxes. Or if you'd prefer, you can just pound it out. There's 2. So when we go to spell this, we're going to spell it in parts. Fox and then is. What's the first sound that you hear in fox? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And what's the second sound that you hear in fox? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And what's the third sound that you hear in fox? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Now let's work on the second syllable in foxes. Is. What's the first sound that you hear in that? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Foxes. Is. What's the next sound that you hear in that? Is. Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Now tap it and say it. Did you get Foxes? So even though we hear that is, and it sounds like it should be is, which would be IZ, we're always going to write the suffix as ES. Okay, let's try a new one. So you can put those tiles back and get your workspace ready. Your word is mixes. So how many syllables are in mixes? Mixes. There's 2. So we're going to spell this in parts. Let's spell the first syllable first. Mix. I might say he mixes a drink. Okay. In mix, what's the first sound that you hear? Mix. Okay, find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And what's the next sound that you hear in mix? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And then what's the last sound in mix? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Now let's work on the second syllable. Mixes. So it's that is. Okay. What's the first sound that you hear in is? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. And then what's the last sound in is? Find the correct tile and pull it to the middle. Now tap it and say it. And look for suffixes, because you know when you have that 2 syllables happening, you're looking for prefixes and suffixes. And this is one that you've used before. So did you write your suffix is as ES? If you did, that's correct. The teacher will check your work And teacher, if you have time permitting, you could do a third word here. And if not, then we'll move on to tapping and writing single words. So you'll need your line paper for this, a pencil, and we're going to tap it out, and we'll tap each sound and say each sound, and then grab the whole word and say the word as we pull it across, and then we'll write it down. So here's your first one. Slips. Can you repeat that word? I might say in a sentence, he slips on a wet spot on the floor. Slips. Can you put it in a sentence? Okay, now tap out the word slips. And then grab the word, say the whole word, and then write it down. Teacher, you can check the work. For the next one, I'd like you to trace it. So you can trace it on your hand, your arm, your leg, saying each sound as you trace the letter. And your word is boxes. Can you say that word? Now let's put it in a sentence. I might stack 10 boxes. Make a big box for it. How would you put that in a sentence? Okay, now trace out boxes and then write it down. Teacher, you can check the work. And it's time to write some sentences. So teacher, you can read the 3 sentences and the student can choose the 2 that are going to be written. After a sentence is written, then make sure the work gets checked by using chops. Let's do a quick review before you go. We've been talking about the concept of base and prefix. Let's think about the word inject. In that word inject, there is a prefix and a base. Teacher, can you quickly form the word inject with some letter tiles and then have the student separate inject into its 2 parts and have a quick discussion about which one is the prefix and which one is the base and what does it mean to be a base? The other main concept that we've been discussing is the different sounds of the letter S when we add it onto a base as a suffix. In this case, we have the base rat. How do we know that the S will be a motor off sound? And this will be rats. Even if I don't read it, I know what it's going to be. Student, can you tell your teacher our way of knowing how it's going to be a motor off sound? Did you say that we look at what happens right before it? And this sound, the T, is a motor off sound. So we just keep the motor off and we use the motor off sound of S. And we've also been saying that sometimes in some words, we don't use S when we add the suffix. We have to use ES. So when is the situation when we can't simply add S? Can you discuss that with your teacher right now? The answer is when we add a second syllable by adding the suffix S. So this becomes fusses. And we can't just add an S because we haven't added a syllable. A vowel, remember at the very beginning when we were learning what is a syllable? We said a syllable is a word or part of a word with 1 vowel pattern. So you have to have a vowel. So the E is stepping in to make this a syllable because we have 2 syllables when we create the S situation. So that's what is going on there. And that's the end of lesson number 27. Great job today. This is Shawna Odette from the Flying Cat Academy.